I didn't mean to hear it. That's the part that stings the most. It was a regular Tuesday, gray and quiet and unmemorable. I just wrapped up work early and decided to call my mom on the drive home. I don't know why I still tried. Habit, I guess. A leftover instinct. Something in me always hoped she'd pick up with a warmth in her voice, that this time it'd feel like more than obligation. She didn't answer. Straight to voicemail. I shrugged and tossed my phone into the passenger seat, but a few minutes later it rang. It was her. I picked up immediately. Hey, Mom. Oh, hi. Can I call you later? I'm in the middle of something. Sure, I said. Just wanted to check in. Okay, sweetheart. Talk later. Click. Or so I thought. I tossed the phone back into the seat and kept driving, not realizing the call hadn't fully disconnected. The screen hadn't gone dark. And then her voice came through my car speakers again. Loud, clear, completely unfiltered. She called again, she said, her tone light, almost amused. She always does. So intense. A pause, then another voice. My dad's, I think, muffled, but unmistakably his. Did you pick up? Just for a second. I told her I was busy. Then came the sentence that cut through me like glass. She's always been so... much. I think she still believes we actually wanted a second child. I froze. My hands clutched the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles went white. My heart didn't race. It dropped. The rest of the conversation blurred around the ringing in my ears. There was laughter. Maybe something about my job. Maybe something about how Naomi always tries too hard. And then the call finally cut off. I pulled over on the side of the road. The kind of emergency stop you make when your soul feels like it just left your body. It wasn't even what she said that hurt the most. It was the tone, casual, effortless, like she'd said it before, like this wasn't a secret, just something they didn't say to me. I sat there for 10, maybe 20 minutes staring at the dashboard. My fingers went cold. My mouth was dry. I didn't cry, not right away, because the words didn't hit like a slap. They sank, slowly, heavy, final. I used to think there were certain things you just know as a kid, that even if your parents weren't overly affectionate, even if they weren't the best at expressing love, there'd be this underlying current, something unshakable, proof that you were wanted. I clung to that belief like a rope for most of my life. My parents weren't cruel, they weren't unkind, but they were distant in ways I learned to normalize. Praise was rare, and if it came, it was usually followed by a reminder not to let it get to your head. When I got straight A's, good, keep it up. When I landed a scholarship, that's what we expected. When I got my first real job, that's what people do. But I told myself that's just how they were. Stoic, practical, emotionally modest. Maybe they loved me in a quiet way. Maybe they just didn't know how to say it. Maybe it didn't matter as long as I kept showing up and doing what they expected. But that phone call ripped the maybe right out of the equation. They hadn't just been quiet with their love. They'd been clear, just never in front of me. I went home that night and sat in the dark. I didn't eat. I didn't text anyone. I didn't even replay the voicemail, even though I could recorded it accidentally through my car's dash system. I didn't need to. The words had carved themselves into the walls of my mind. She still believes we actually wanted a second child. I was the second child. The quiet one. The one who didn't cause trouble, didn't break curfew, didn't scream at the dinner table. The one who tried hard, so hard, to be what they needed, to be what they could love. And yet, here I was, 32 years old, realizing I might have been the solution to a problem I didn't even create. A filler. An afterthought. Or worse, an answer to some shame they never admitted out loud. I couldn't prove it yet. I had no evidence, no dates, no documents, no real story. But the way she said it, that wasn't frustration, that was truth. Old truth, deep truth, spoken casually because they'd long stopped hiding it, from themselves at least. And maybe they never imagined I'd hear it. But I did. And now? Now I couldn't unhear it. You think you've imagined the distance your whole life until you hear it out loud. That night I knew something had changed, not just between me and my parents, but inside me. Because once you realize you weren't truly chosen, you start questioning what parts of your life ever really belong to you. And worse What parts were always borrowed, temporary, conditional? I didn't know it then, but that call wasn't the end of anything. It was the beginning. The beginning of unlearning everything I thought I understood about my family and about myself. Growing up, I thought I had a good childhood. I wasn't abused. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't neglected in any of the big headline-grabbing ways. We lived in a tidy, middle-class house. My parents stayed married. My older sister Lily and I shared a room till we were teenagers. There were birthday cakes, summer trips, school projects taped proudly to the fridge. We looked like a postcard family. But looking back, I realize we looked the part. We just didn't live it. Because what I thought was a childhood was actually a performance. One I didn't audition for, but got cast in anyway. And the role I played? The quiet one. The good one. The one who didn't ask for much. Not because I didn't want to, but because I learned early that asking didn't get me anywhere. Lily was the golden girl. The one with the big eyes, big feelings, big presence. When she cried, people noticed. When she succeeded, they celebrated. She was the firstborn. Loud, dramatic, a little fragile. She hated thunderstorms, refused to sleep alone, and once refused to go to school because she didn't like her socks. Mom would sigh, rub her back, whisper that some kids were just more sensitive, that she needed more understanding. And me? I was told I was reasonable. Mature for my age. Such a helper. I made my own breakfast by the time I was 7, packed my lunch, folded laundry, helped Lily with her homework, even when she was older than me. I got straight A's and never needed reminding. I didn't cry over mismatched socks, so I was labeled independent. At first it felt like a compliment, until I realized it was an excuse not to check in, not to listen, not to ask if I was okay, because reasonable kids don't need to be comforted. Independent kids don't get the soft voice or the extra hug. They get praised for not needing anything, until they start to believe they shouldn't. When I got the lead in our middle school play, Mom said, "That's nice, but don't get distracted from your grades." When I had my first heartbreak at 15 and came home quiet, hollowed out, she said, "You'll get over it. Focus on your future." When I was nominated for a regional student award, Dad nodded and said, "That's what hard work gets you." No smile, no warmth. But when Lily passed her driver's test on the 3rd try, they baked a cake, took photos, called the grandparents. That kind of difference doesn't make sense when you're young. You just start to believe that maybe you weren't as lovable. So I compensated. I became the high achiever, the planner, the over-preparer, the one who always asked, "What else can I do?" Not because I needed approval, but because I was afraid of what would happen if I didn't earn it. Because when love is given freely, you don't question it. But when it only shows up after you check all the boxes, you start building your identity around being useful. Not human, not messy, not flawed, just useful. I don't remember when it stopped hurting and started becoming a pattern. Maybe around high school when Lily started acting out and I became the stabilizer. I drove her places when she got grounded. I talked her down when she screamed at Mom. I took blame for things she did. Once even taking the fall for breaking a window she threw a shoe through just to keep peace in the house. It wasn't noble. It was survival. Because if I wasn't the easy one, the good one, the responsible one, what else was I? Certainly not the favorite. Definitely not the center. People always said I was lucky to have such a grounded family. Teachers loved my mom at PTA. Neighbors said we were so close. We weren't close. We were compliant. I fit the role I was given. And for a long time I believed that was enough. That if I could just keep being helpful, being capable, being not a burden, eventually someone would say it. We're proud of you. We see you. We're glad you're ours." But they never did. Not really. And the phone call, the one I wasn't meant to hear, confirmed what I had only dared to whisper in the quietest corners of my mind. They didn't want me. They wanted the idea of me. The symbol. The fill-in-the-blank second child who made them look stable, functional, perfect. And I had played my part so well for so long, I almost forgot it wasn't real. Now sitting in my apartment, 32 years old, staring at a glass of wine I haven't touched, I think about all those moments from childhood. All those times I walked into a room and felt like I wasn't really there. All those achievements that were met with silence. All those birthdays where the candles were lit, the cake was served, and no one asked what I wished for, because I wouldn't have known what to say. All I wanted was to be chosen, not expected, not convenient, just chosen. It was supposed to be a celebration. At least that's what I told myself as I stood outside the venue, watching through the tall windows as my family laughed, clinked glasses, and posed for photos. It was my brother's engagement party, a big one. Rented space, string lights, a catered dinner, everyone dressed like it was a wedding rehearsal. I wasn't on the planning thread. I didn't even know it was happening until a cousin posted about it on Instagram the day before. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself it was just an oversight, that I was busy anyway, that maybe they thought I wouldn't care. But when I showed up smiling and hugging relatives like I didn't feel like an afterthought, no one looked surprised to see me. No one said, "We missed you." No one even said, "Glad you're here." It was like I'd never left. And like I'd never really mattered in the first place. The whole night I floated between conversations like a polite ghost. I made small talk, I helped refill drinks, I watched from the sidelines as my parents toasted my brother and his fiancée, praising their resilience and growth. Words I had never heard pointed in my direction. Then I heard my mother say it, not to me, to another family friend. "Michael's been through a lot. He deserves this." It shouldn't have hit me the way it did, but it did. That word, deserve, carved something in the open in me. What had I deserved? I'd gone through a lot, too. I'd held space for everyone else's chaos. I'd cleaned up messes. I'd buried pain. I'd played the role. I'd been quiet when I should have spoken, smiled when I wanted to cry. I thought maybe, just maybe, that counted for something. But apparently what I'd done was be too good at surviving. And for that, I'd earned silence. Later that night, I found myself in the upstairs hallway near the coat room. I just needed a break from the noise. My aunt's purse was sitting on a bench, and I reached for it. Not to snoop, just to move it out of the way. When a folded paper fell out, an old printout of an email chain, something personal, and I almost shoved it back in until I saw my name. I know Elise had Naomi for the optics. It wasn't love, it was strategy. I was there when our father laid it out. Richard was willing to take the fall, but it was all a cover. I just hope Naomi never finds out. She's already too soft. It took me a second to realize what I was reading, and then another to accept that no. This wasn't about another Naomi. This was about me. I folded it back slowly, slipped it back into the purse, walked downstairs and stood in the corner of the party, sipping champagne and trying not to pass out. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing the words over and over. She's already too soft. They didn't mean to let me see it. That's what shattered me the most. The lie didn't fall apart because they came clean. It fell apart because they forgot to keep hiding it. That's when I realized the truth wasn't just painful. It had always been sitting in plain sight. I just hadn't let myself look. The next morning I sat in my car for 30 minutes before going inside my apartment. I kept staring at the steering wheel, thinking about the word strategy, about how they must have looked at me all these years, and not as a daughter, but as a solution, a calculation, a distraction from some mistake they didn't want the world to see. All those times I thought I was the boring child, the background one. It wasn't because I didn't shine. It was because my shine didn't serve their story. I didn't cry, not then. I just felt hollow, like the version of me that had believed in my place at the table was slowly fading into vapor. That night I called out sick from work. I didn't even try to explain. I just needed stillness. I made tea, curled up on the floor with a blanket, and let myself ask the questions I'd been afraid to. What if none of this was ever about me? What if I was never supposed to be seen? What if they only ever wanted me to stay quiet, stay safe, stay useful? I started pulling out old boxes from my closet, journals, school awards, birthday cards. I wanted to see if I could trace it, if the signs were always there. And they were. The birthday card when I turned 10. To our little helper, thank you for making the life easier. The high school graduation note. You've always been the calm in the storm. Don't lose that. Not, we're proud of you. Not, we love you. Just appreciation for my utility. Gratitude for how well I absorbed impact. All those times I walked into a room and felt like I wasn't really there. All those achievements that were met with silence. All those birthdays where the candles were lit, the cake was served, and no one asked what I wished for, because I wouldn't have known what to say. All I wanted was to be chosen, not expected, not convenient, just chosen. It was supposed to be a celebration. At least that's what I told myself as I stood outside the venue, watching through the tall windows as my family laughed, clinked glasses, and posed for photos. It was my brother's engagement party, a big one. Rented space, string lights, a catered dinner, everyone dressed like it was a wedding rehearsal. I wasn't on the planning thread. I didn't even know it was happening until a cousin posted about it on Instagram the day before. I tried not to be bitter. I told myself it was just an oversight, that I was busy anyway, that maybe they thought I wouldn't care. But when I showed up smiling and hugging relatives like I didn't feel like an afterthought, no one looked surprised to see me. No one said, "We missed you." No one even said, "Glad you're here." It was like I'd never left. And like I'd never really mattered in the first place. The whole night I floated between conversations like a polite ghost. I made small talk, I helped refill drinks, I watched from the sidelines as my parents toasted my brother and his fiancée, praising their resilience and growth. Words I had never heard pointed in my direction. Then I heard my mother say it, not to me, to another family friend. "Michael's been through a lot. He deserves this." It shouldn't have hit me the way it did, but it did. That word, deserve, carved something in the open in me. What had I deserved? I'd gone through a lot, too. I'd held space for everyone else's chaos. I'd cleaned up messes. I'd buried pain. I'd played the role. I'd been quiet when I should have spoken, smiled when I wanted to cry. I thought maybe, just maybe, that counted for something. But apparently what I'd done was be too good at surviving. And for that, I'd earned silence. Later that night, I found myself in the upstairs hallway near the coat room. I just needed a break from the noise. My aunt's purse was sitting on a bench, and I reached for it. Not to snoop, just to move it out of the way. When a folded paper fell out, an old printout of an email chain, something personal, and I almost shoved it back in until I saw my name. I know Elise had Naomi for the optics. It wasn't love, it was strategy. I was there when our father laid it out. Richard was willing to take the fall, but it was all a cover. I just hope Naomi never finds out. She's already too soft. It took me a second to realize what I was reading, and then another to accept that no. This wasn't about another Naomi. This was about me. I folded it back slowly, slipped it back into the purse, walked downstairs and stood in the corner of the party, sipping champagne and trying not to pass out. That night, I didn't sleep. I kept hearing the words over and over. She's already too soft. They didn't mean to let me see it. That's what shattered me the most. The lie didn't fall apart because they came clean. It fell apart because they forgot to keep hiding it. That's when I realized the truth wasn't just painful. It had always been sitting in plain sight. I just hadn't let myself look. The next morning I sat in my car for 30 minutes before going inside my apartment. I kept staring at the steering wheel, thinking about the word strategy, about how they must have looked at me all these years, and not as a daughter, but as a solution, a calculation, a distraction from some mistake they didn't want the world to see. All those times I thought I was the boring child, the background one. It wasn't because I didn't shine. It was because my shine didn't serve their story. I didn't cry, not then. I just felt hollow, like the version of me that had believed in my place at the table was slowly fading into vapor. That night I called out sick from work. I didn't even try to explain. I just needed stillness. I made tea, curled up on the floor with a blanket, and let myself ask the questions I'd been afraid to. What if none of this was ever about me? What if I was never supposed to be seen? What if they only ever wanted me to stay quiet, stay safe, stay useful? I started pulling out old boxes from my closet, journals, school awards, birthday cards. I wanted to see if I could trace it, if the signs were always there. And they were. The birthday card when I turned 10. To our little helper, thank you for making the life easier. The high school graduation note. You've always been the calm in the storm. Don't lose that. Not, we're proud of you. Not, we love you. Just appreciation for my utility. Gratitude for how well I absorbed impact. I remember feeling a familiar ache in my chest. A weight I used to think was shame. But now I recognized it for what it truly was. Grief. Grief for the childhood I convinced myself was fine. Grief for the love I'd rebranded as discipline. Grief for the girl who thought if she was just good enough, she'd be chosen, fully, loudly, undeniably. I stopped answering messages from my mom after that. I didn't have the language yet for what I felt, so I chose silence. Not out of cruelty, but because I needed to hear myself think for once. The next few weeks felt like walking through fog. I still went to work. I still picked up groceries, but there was a dissonance I couldn't shake, like I was living beside my life, not in it. Until one day I looked in the mirror and said aloud, "You didn't do anything wrong." And I cried, ugly, shaking sobs that came from some place deep in my gut. It was the first time I'd said those words. Not about someone else, but about me. I didn't do anything wrong. I was just born into a story that didn't have space for me unless I played the part they wrote. And I was finally ready to stop acting. After the night of the party, something in me shifted. I didn't rage. I didn't scream. I didn't call anyone to demand an explanation. I just went still. Like something inside had finally gone quiet after thrashing for years. But stillness isn't the same as peace. Not when the questions start to echo louder than the silence. I needed to know the rest of the story. I didn't want closure. I didn't even expect understanding. I just couldn't sit with half-truths anymore. So I started digging. It began with a visit to City Hall. I requested a copy of my birth certificate just to see it with fresh eyes. The name of the hospital? Not the one my mom had always mentioned. It was a private women's clinic across town, one I'd never even heard of growing up. I called Aunt Lorraine and asked if I could stop by for tea. I didn't tell her why. I just said I had some questions about family stuff. Her voice on the phone was warm but hesitant. When I arrived, she had already set out a teapot and 2 mugs, like she knew this wasn't going to be a quick catch-up. We chatted for a few minutes. About the garden, about her hip pain, about the neighbor's new dog. I was the one who broke the stillness. "Aunt Lorraine," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "can I ask you something personal about when I was born?" Her spoon paused in midair. She set it down. "Of course, honey, but why now?" I slid the birth certificate across the table. "This hospital, Camden Women's Clinic, that's not where Mom always said I was born." Her eyes scanned it. Her mouth opened, then closed again. Her hand found the edge of the table. "Lorraine, please. I'm not angry. I just need to know." She leaned back in her chair and took a long breath. Then she looked out the window as if searching for a time she thought she'd buried. "Elise was barely 21, she said finally. She'd just broken up with someone her parents didn't approve of. Then she found out she was pregnant. It was chaos. Your grandfather was furious. They didn't want a scandal, so they arranged things quickly. She married Richard, who was kind but also convenient, and they sent her away to Camden." "To hide me," I said. Her silence was an answer. "Do you know who my father is?" I asked, already bracing for the answer. She shook her head. "No one really does. Maybe your mother. Maybe not even her. But it wasn't Richard." That much was understood. I sat very still. It felt like the kitchen shrank around me. "She never wanted to talk about it," Aunt Lorraine said softly. "She wanted a clean start. But sometimes silence leaves bigger cracks than any truth ever could." I walked home that day and didn't speak to anyone. I didn't even cry. I just sat on my living room floor holding the printout of my birth certificate like it might dissolve in my hands. Born from strategy, not from love, not from joy. I was the thing they had to hide, the patch they used to cover a tear. I kept turning those words over and over again in my head. I wasn't born from love. I was born to fix something, to quiet gossip, to realign a timeline that had gone off script. That's what my existence had been. Not a miracle, not a blessing, but a correction. And suddenly every moment of my life made sense in the worst way. All the times my mother kept me at a distance, all the times she praised my brother's ambition, my cousin's charm, my sister's softness, but never said much about me. I was reliable, I was stable, I didn't rock the boat. I'd been raised but never embraced. I wasn't the child they loved out loud. I was the child they couldn't afford not to have. That realization didn't just hurt, it rearranged me. I found myself standing in front of my parents' house 2 days later. I hadn't planned it. My feet just took me there. I rang the doorbell. My mom answered, surprised. "Naomi, everything okay?" I didn't say anything at first. I just held out the paper. The birth certificate, the envelope, and a copy of the email I had found. Her face dropped. She opened the door wider. "Come in." I sat at the kitchen table. The same one where I'd done school projects, packed lunches, once cried about a college rejection. My dad wasn't home. I was glad. She sat across from me, hands trembling. "You found out?" she said finally. "I think I always knew," I replied. "I just didn't have the language for it." She looked down. I was 21. My parents were furious. Richard was willing to lie. He wanted to help me, and it was easier to raise you in silence than to tell the truth and ruin everything. "You didn't ruin anything," I said. "You just didn't love me enough to tell me who I really was." Her eyes welled with tears, but I didn't reach for her hand. I didn't soften. Not this time. I left with no screaming, no final speech, just a quiet goodbye. That night I wrote down everything I had learned, not to keep but to release, to make it real, to purge it from memory and move it into understanding. Then I lit a candle, opened the windows, and let the air move through the room. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done needing answers. I was done trying to belong in a story that had never truly been mine. I wasn't born from love. I was born from a need to preserve what they thought was perfect. And now, finally, I was choosing to be imperfect. Loudly, freely, fully, on my own terms. It's strange how freedom feels at first. Like stepping into a room without realizing you've been holding your breath in the last one. That's what the weeks after my confrontation with my mother felt like. Not relief exactly, but expansion. I was finally standing outside of the narrative they had built for me. And for the first time, I didn't have to apologize for rewriting it. I started with small things. I stopped answering family group chats, no explanation, no dramatic exit, just silence. I unfollowed the cousins who only reached out when they needed something. I took down the framed family photos in my hallway. I didn't throw them away, but I put them in a box labeled "Not Now." Then one Friday night, I booked a cabin for myself upstate. Alone. Just me, a stack of books, and the sound of trees creaking outside. It was the best sleep I'd had in years. At work I felt different too. Lighter, more grounded. I used to over-explain everything I did. Over-prepare for every meeting, every presentation, just in case someone questioned whether I belonged. Now I spoke clearly and calmly and let the room adjust to me. One afternoon, after leading a campaign pitch that went better than I'd hoped, my creative director pulled me aside. "You know," she said, "you've grown so much this year. You're not just good. You're someone people trust." I nodded, smiled, said thank you. But inside I'd whispered something else. It's not growth. It's reclamation. I reconnected with an old friend from college, Maya, who had always seen through the masks I didn't know I was wearing back then. We started meeting every Saturday morning for coffee and long walks. No judgment, no fixing, just presence. Maya didn't ask why I'd pulled away from my family. She didn't push for details. She just said, "I'm glad you're here." And I believed her. My birthday came around a month later. I didn't tell anyone at work. I didn't organize a dinner or expect calls. Instead, I took the day off, and I slept in, ordered my favorite breakfast, went to a little florist downtown and picked out a small bouquet of orange ranunculus and eucalyptus, warm and sharp, just like I felt. Then I walked to a bakery and bought a single slice of cake, chocolate with sea salt. I asked them to write "to me" on top in white icing. At home, I sat at my kitchen table and opened the card I'd written to myself that morning. "To the version of me that was never seen, I see you now. You don't have to be useful to be loved. You don't have to perform to be worth remembering. You're here. You're whole. Happy birthday," I cried. But they weren't the kind of tears I used to swallow during the holidays. They were soft and unrushed, cleansing. That night I lit a candle and whispered, "I'm proud of you." And for the first time I didn't hope someone else would say it too. Later that week an email popped up in my inbox from a small creative magazine I admired. They wanted to feature my latest project, the campaign I had pitched in their upcoming issue. Not because of who I knew, not because of networking, just because they liked my work. I forwarded it to Maya with a single word. "Finally." She replied, "Told you." What they never saw, my family, I mean, was the version of me that bloomed after they stopped watering. They didn't see how I learned to love my own company, how I made space for my own voice, how I didn't disappear when they turned away. I became more vivid. They told me I was too much. Turns out I was just too real for the version of family that only loved on conditions. And now? Now I was writing a new story. Not one where I had to be grateful for scraps, but one where I got to feast at my own table. I wasn't the daughter they imagined, but I'm the woman I was always meant to become. My life isn't glamorous, it's not perfect, but it is mine. Most mornings now I wake up in the quiet. No tension sitting on my chest. No voice in the back of my mind rehearsing what I'll say to make someone approve, to win someone back. I make my own coffee. Sometimes it's too strong, sometimes too weak. I drink it anyway. It feels honest. There's a small park 2 blocks away from my apartment, and I go there often. I bring a notebook and sit on the same bench under a crooked oak tree. I don't write anything profound. Just thoughts, fragments, the kind of words that used to get caught in my throat. Here they're free to land. My therapist once told me, peace isn't loud. It's quiet enough that you can hear your own truth. I didn't understand that at first. I thought healing would feel like fireworks or maybe a parade. But no. Healing feels like taking your shoes off and realizing your feet still remember how to walk. Sometimes I look at that group text. The family one I left. It still exists. I know because they started a new thread and left my name off it. A cousin accidentally sent me a screenshot once, and I saw it. For a second I felt that old sting, the ache of being left out. But it passed, because I wasn't excluded anymore. I had simply stepped out. A few months ago, a distant aunt reached out. She said she'd read about my campaign in a magazine, and that my mom was so proud. She wrote, "Your mom always brags about you. You should call her sometime." I stared at the message for a long time. Brags about me? Funny, considering she spent most of my life acting like I was an overreaction, like I was a version of womanhood she couldn't quite understand or claim. Number I didn't call. I didn't respond. I don't hate my family. I don't wish them harm. But I don't owe them access to a version of me they never bothered to know. Sometimes people ask me, do you miss them? I don't know how to answer that. Do I miss the ache of waiting for their approval? The performance of pretending everything they said didn't sting? Do I miss twisting myself small so they wouldn't call me dramatic? Number, and I don't miss that. I think what I miss is the idea of them. The version I used to imagine. The one where love wasn't about condition, performance, or convenience. The one where a daughter didn't have to be perfect or passive to be seen. But I'm not mourning that anymore. I'm making peace with the version of the story that actually happened. Not the one I hoped for. There's a photo of me that someone took recently at an event. I'm standing in front of a mural I helped design. Arms crossed, half smiling, eyes calm. When I look at it, I don't see the girl trying to be good enough. I see the woman who walked through the storm and stopped waiting for a rescue. I see someone I would have wanted as a friend when I was 12, someone I needed when I was 16, someone I became. Not for them, but for me. The last time I saw my mother was brief. It was at a mutual acquaintance's funeral. She walked up to me like nothing had happened. "You look well," she said. "Still working in marketing?" I nodded. She smiled like we were old co-workers. "That's good. We were just talking about you the other day. Your cousin said he saw your ad campaign on the train." "That's nice," I said. And then, because I needed to hear it out loud, I added, "I'm doing really well." She nodded again as if that answer was enough for her. It wasn't, of course. But it was enough for me. I left first. I didn't look back. I don't tell this story for pity. I tell it because people need to know that family isn't always synonymous with love. Sometimes the deepest betrayal isn't what they say, but what they never bothered to see. I was never dramatic. I was honest in a room full of people who preferred the silence. I look at the message sometimes. The one my mother accidentally sent. The one that started all of this. It's still saved in a folder on my phone, not out of spite, just as a reminder. It's not like she's curing cancer. I used to hear that and feel small, like I had to prove myself louder, bigger, shinier. Now I read it and shrug. No, I'm not curing cancer. I'm curing myself from the need to be loved by people who only love selectively. They told me I was too full of myself. But maybe that's because I stopped leaving the room for their disrespect. They called me dramatic when I bled, and now that I've healed, they pretend the wound never existed. But I remember, and I moved on. I just didn't take them with me.